Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one. The introduction, April 14th, 2019, was a day that began with promise in the small town of Briar Hollow. The sun rose slowly over the horizon, casting a warm glow on the quiet streets, where children rode their bikes and families strolled toward the park. Yet beneath this veneer of tranquility lay a darker undercurrent of storm, brewing within the lives of some residents. The woods that bordered the town, lush and vibrant, were known for their secretive trails and a disturbing history of strange disappearances. Local lore whispered of everything from runaways seeking refuge to the more sinister tales of opportunists taking advantage of those lost in the dense thickets. However, few could have anticipated that mere whispers would soon give way to tragedy. As twilight approached, a cyclist named Jamie Peters rounded a bend on one of the remote trails. She was a figure of joy and vibrancy in the community, known for her infectious smile and penchant for lending a helping hand. Jamie had planned a routine evening ride before meeting friends for dinner, her helmet gleaming in the fading light. Splashes of orange and deep purple decorated the sky, and the scent of damp earth wafted through the air. But that evening, as the sun surrendered to dusk, the serene surroundings turned treacherous. Moments later, as silence consumed the woods, Jamie's absence would ripple through Briar Hollow, unraveling the tightly knit fabric of the town. The peaceful facade had crumbled, and a chilling mystery began to unfold that would seep into the lives of many. The victim, Jamie Peters, was more than just a cyclist. She was the very heart of Briar Hollow. At 28, she had become a fixture around town, known for her endless energy and commitment to community service. She volunteered at the local animal shelter, organized Charity 5X, and had an uncanny ability to remember everyone's names, drawing people in with her brightness. Friends and acquaintances alike cherished her laugh. To them, it felt like light penetrating through the overcast skies that often loomed above. On the surface, her life seemed enviable. However, Jamie, like all of us, had her battles that few ever saw. The pressures of adulthood were mounting work stress at the local school, where she taught art, a looming student loan burden, and a quest for a sense of belonging in an ever-changing world. Through it all, she remained resilient, adopting a problem-solve and move-on attitude. The day of her disappearance had been unremarkable, filled with mundane tasks and easy conversations. After finishing her lessons, she shared a quick lunch with colleagues, boasting about her latest running times and expressing her excitement for the weekend. As she left the school that Friday afternoon, she assured her friends she would be home in time to prepare for their plans. No one could have predicted it would be the last time they would see her. The air around town turned electric with concern as news of her disappearance spread. Friends formed search parties, scouring through the woods. Yet, as dusk faded into night, the primal fear of the unknown began to grip Briar Hollow. Who would want to harm Jamie Peters, and why? The crime scene. The early morning of April 15th dawned with a heavy fog that blanketed Briar Hollow, lending an eerie stillness to the atmosphere. Search teams had reconvened at dawn, their spirits mingled with anxiety as they ventured into the woods where Jamie was last seen. The air was thick with uncertainty, each step forward treading the line between hope and dread. It was not long before a shout broke through the quiet and echo that sent shivers down spines. In a clearing surrounded by towering pines, where the ground was damp from the previous night's rain, they stumbled upon Jamie's bicycle, its frame coated in dew, resting against a gnarled tree trunk. The sight instantly ignited a torrent of emotions. Panic seeped into the hearts of her friends, combined with an overwhelming sense of foreboding. The area was immediately cordoned off by police, who arrived shortly after receiving the frantic call from the searchers. Detectives methodically surveyed the terrain, taking in every detail: a lone tire mark in the soft earth, a discarded glove, and faint drag marks leading deeper into the woods. The initial thoughts of a tragic accident began to dissolve, replaced instead by the unsettling realization that something more sinister had taken place. As officers combed the area for clues, the pervasive silence of the forest felt almost mocking. Sunlight struggled to pierce through the fog, leaving long shadows in its wake. The forest, once a place of solace for Jamie, had transformed into a haunting tableau that would forever change the lives of those who called Briar Hollow home. An unseen predator lurked somewhere, and the hunt to uncover the truth had officially begun. The early investigation. As the sun crested the horizon, the fog reluctantly began to lift, revealing a grim scene played out against the backdrop of the woods. With a grim determination, the Briar Hollow Police Department initiated their investigation, understanding the urgency of a timely resolution. Detective Laura Hastings, a seasoned investigator with a keen intuition, took the lead. She had seen her share of cases, but knew that Jamie's disappearance felt uniquely pressing. Too many threads of community connection were at stake. Detective Hastings gathered her team, emphasizing the need for meticulous attention to detail. They set about canvassing the area, interviewing witnesses and searching for anything that might provide insight into Jamie's final hours. Residents were questioned at the local cafe and nearby homes, their faces etched with concern. But despite the outpouring of community spirit, initial leads proved scarce. One name surfaced repeatedly in conversation: Eric Sanders, a local handyman known for his reclusive nature. Last seen in his workshop near the trail, whispers about his erratic behavior elevated suspicion. Hastings dispatched officers to locate and talk to him, while the investigator herself took to interviewing Jamie's friends. Each spoke highly of her, yet a common theme emerged. Jamie had recently expressed feelings of unease about someone following her on her long evening runs. As the first day of the investigation wore on, a collective sense of frustration began to fester. Police widened their focus, gathering surveillance footage from shops and street cameras in the area. Any scrap of information became critical. Time was of the essence, and the haunting specter of Jamie's absence loomed large over the town. A deliberate sense of urgency enveloped the detective, else any step could mean losing the trail for good. The dead ends. Days turned into a week, and the community poured itself into searching for Jamie Peters. However, as time progressed, optimism gave way to growing anxiety and frustration. Each lead, carefully pursued by Detective Hastings and her team, led to dead ends. Unfounded rumors and wild speculation ran rampant. Surveillance footage from near the local shops yielded nothing of substance. No trace of Jamie or any suspicious individuals could be identified. Interviews with Eric Sanders produced a muddle of alibis. He claimed to have been working on a renovation project and had not ventured near the woods that evening. Witnesses who initially placed him at the scene adjusted their statements, leaving detectives with more questions than answers. Anxiety stretched thin throughout Briar Hollow, and whispers began to echo through the town's streets. Rumors circulated of a stranger spotted multiple times near the park, unkempt and lurking in shadows, but no definitive sightings emerged. Hastings followed every lead, but found her pursuit met with a string of misleading claims. Each thread she pulled seemed to further entangle the investigation, leading nowhere. The frustration among Jamie's friends mounted. They had come together in solidarity, But as days turned into solemn, sleepless nights, doubts began to fester. With every passing hour, hope dimmed, and shadows thickened over the town that once thrived on community spirit. Hastings held on to the slivers of information, determined not to let despair cloud her resolve. Desperation began to materialize. Time was slipping away, and the trail to Jamie grew colder by the day. As the detectives regrouped, the forest that had initially felt so vast now loomed like an unyielding wall, confounding their every effort. With each investigation day fading into nightfall, the sense of dread deepened. A question hung in the air. Who could vanish without a trace? A break in the case. Almost 2 weeks had passed since Jamie Peters vanished. The once vibrant community of Briar Hollow now bore the weight of grief and uncertainty, an atmosphere thick with fatigue and the strain of anticipation. Detective Hastings, however, refused to yield to despair. Fueled by determination, she scoured through the stack of evidence, retracing steps and digging into minute details that had previously been overlooked. It was during one of these restless evenings, while reviewing the interviews conducted with Jamie's friends, that a familiar name stood out. Leah, a close confidante and fellow teacher at the local school. Leah mentioned that Jamie had received strange texts from an unknown number in the days leading up to her disappearance, reaching out with unsettling messages that increasingly made Jamie uneasy. Hastings swiftly decided to revisit Leah, hoping for clarity. As they sat across from each other in a quiet corner of the cafe, Leah unearthed her phone and painstakingly recalled moments during Jamie's final week. With shaky hands, she navigated through her messages and unearthed the number, a cryptic series of digits that sent an electric thrill through Hastings. Leah had initially dismissed the texts as pranks, but Jamie had felt threatened. Detective Hastings wasted no time. With the number in hand, she contacted the telecommunications provider to trace its origin. The anticipation crackled in the air as she waited for answers. Hours stretched into what felt like an eternity, but finally a call came through, a name and address that would lead them to a suspect. A man known for having a history of stalking complaints filed against. Her heart raced as she penned notes, her mind firing with possibilities. As Hastings relayed the news to her team, sparks of renewed hope flared in the dimness of their shared. The breakthrough was fragile yet potent. They were no longer wandering blindly through dark woods. A trail had emerged. The hunt for Jamie Peters was reignited, and the resolve to find her intensified. The suspect. The lead was a lifeline, but it brought with it a heavy burden. Detective Hastings, fueled by a potent mix of determination and dread, gathered her team early the following morning to discuss their next move. Understanding that the man connected to Jamie's mysterious text messages, Mark Dawson, had a troubled history of unwanted attention, they approached the situation with heightened sensitivity. They arrived at a modest apartment complex on the outskirts of Briar Hollow, where Dawson resided. The building sagged under years of neglect, a far cry from the bustle of town. Hastings knocked firmly on the door, her senses heightened and ready for anything. After a brief pause, the door creaked open, revealing a disheveled figure, pale and thin, his eyes darting nervously. "Detective Hastings, Briar Hollow Police," she announced, her voice steady. "We need to ask you a few questions about Jamie Peters." The words hung in the air as she assessed his reaction. The flicker of recognition and panicked expression told her everything she needed to know. Mark Dawson was on edge. As they entered the cramped living room, the tension cracked like a thunderclap. Hastings carefully unfolded the details of their investigation, watching for signs of guilt or deception. Dawson fidgeted, his fingers tapping against an unkempt pile of magazines. As questions flowed about his whereabouts on the night of Jamie's disappearance and the nature of his connection to her, his answers became increasingly defensive, riddled with inconsistency. Hastings could feel the weight of their suspicions grow as Dawson attempted to deflect blame. He insisted that the presence of other tenants in the complex had provided him with an alibi, his voice rising in agitation. In that moment, Hastings recognized a significant detail. A certain desperation flickered in his eyes, but there was also an underlying arrogance surfacing. Before leaving, she glanced around the apartment, noting the scattered remnants of a chaotic life, dishes piled high, strange knickknacks, and unsettling posters lining the wall. This was a man struggling to maintain a facade, and Hastings sensed that beneath it lay something far darker. The interview had yielded elusive pieces, but with each minute that passed, the vivid portrait of their suspect only grew sharper. The trial. Months passed, yet the heartache of Jamie Peters' disappearance continued to grip Briar Hollow like a vice. Like the town, the case had evolved, and the moment they had all feared finally arrived. Mark Dawson's trial. The courtroom, transformed into an arena of tension, buzzed with murmurs as local residents filled the benches, a mix of hope and dread painted across their faces. As the proceedings commenced, Detective Hastings sat among friends and family members of Jamie, a tumult of emotion swirling within her anger and grief, guides through the unfolding narrative. The prosecution presented a crystalline case against Dawson, outlining the timeline of events surrounding Jamie's disappearance, interwoven with his disturbing past. They laid bare the evidence gathered, the texts, witness statements, and Dawson's erratic behavior. Dawson's defense, an attempt to construct a wall of reasonable doubt, painted him as an innocent victim of circumstance, claiming he had been targeted due to his history, asserting he had no motive to harm Jamie. As the defense attorney invoked the names of the townspeople, Hastings could see the skepticism ripple through their expressions. They remembered the tension in the air when Dawson was questioned, and his frantic demeanor during the investigation. Witness after witness recounted their interactions with Dawson, painting a portrait of a man who had skated dangerously close to the edge of obsession. Yet as the days unfolded, it became clear that a knife edge of uncertainty lingered. There was no body, no definitive proof of what transpired in the woods that fateful evening. As the trial veered into its final days, jurors were left to wrestle with their own doubts, churning under the weight of what was yet unraveled. Meanwhile, Hastings fought to remain resilient, reassuring Jamie's loved ones that they were one step closer to justice. The pressure mounted, and they awaited the jury's decision with bated breath. Finally, the courtroom grew hushed, the air thick with unspoken fears. The jury emerged, foreman standing to deliver the verdict, and as those words hung in the balance, hearts quickened, eager for closure, yet terrified of the implications that would follow. The aftermath. The verdict reverberated through the courtroom like a thunderclap, leaving in its wake a collective gasp from the audience that felt almost palpable. Mark Dawson was found guilty of kidnapping and manslaughter, a decision that rang heavy with the weight of truth, yet tinged with sorrow. The trial had been a cauldron of emotions, unearthing the raw wounds of loss that would never entirely heal. In the weeks that followed, Briar Hollow grappled with the aftermath of the trial. The town struggled to reclaim its sense of safety and community, an uphill battle marked by lingering unease and an unshakable void. Memorials and vigils sprouted across the landscape where Jamie had once ridden her bike, a testament to the life she had lived and the love that bound her friends and family together. Detective Hastings, despite the closure the verdict brought, found herself haunted by unanswered questions. While it was a victory, it wasn't a true resolution. Jamie had not been found, and with her memory still so fragile, Hastings poured herself into the case, hoping for some leads that would lay the restless spirit of the investigation to rest. As investigators combed through the woods again, searching for any trace of Jamie, the community stood united, preparing to face a new reality. Meanwhile, Leah and the other teachers at Jamie's school organized fundraisers in her honor, establishing a scholarship in her name for future art students, seeking to keep Jamie's spirit alive in the hearts of those who followed. They collaborated to create murals in the town as a nod to Jamie's passion for art, each stroke a reminder that life, despite its tribulations, continued to flourish. As the seasons changed, the haunting specter of Jamie's absence remained a part of Briar Hollow's fabric. Detective Hastings found solace in knowing her work had protected the community from further harm. She had dared to pull back the layers of darkness that sought to envelop them. Yet still her heart ached for the peace that would never be filled to laughter and light of Jamie Peters. Reflection. The days turned into months, and the tumult of Jamie Peters' disappearance and subsequent trial faded into a haunting memory for Briar Hollow. Yet the echoes of what had transpired lingered like whispers in the wind, shaping the lives of those left behind. Detective Hastings often found herself reflecting on the fragility of existence, the thin lines that can separate joy from sorrow, safety from fear. As she walked through the main square, Hastings observed how life continued. Children played in the park where Jamie once shared laughter with her friends, and the familiar aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air from the cafe where the community had gathered to mourn and celebrate. Those memories of laughter, crushed by the relentless tide of tragedy, had forged a connection that could never be broken. She would revisit the case files, hoping to find some minor detail that might lead to Jamie's remake. However, Hastings had learned that not all stories have clear endings, as sometimes hope lies not in resolution, but in remembrance. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow across the town, she understood that while Jamie's story had led to heartache, it also strengthened the bonds among friends, family, and neighbors. Grief, while heavy, had woven threads of resilience through the fabric of Briar Hollow. Life would continue to unfurl, but the lessons learned from the tragedy would echo on and on, unfading testament to the beauty and fragility of life.